I find that is a fine line between I'm a curious human being trying to learn because I love learning and my trauma. When I'm supposed to be here, if I'm here, I have to prove why I'm here. BIPOC and an immigrant in Canada is someone who was trying to heal trauma. I don't know if I should be in this planet or not. And then you land in a land that is not really your land in some way. I was really pushing myself. Something was really pushing myself towards my healing. And I had a chance to have a session with Gabor. And I remember sharing with him the fact that my mom and my dad never planned me. I wasn't planned. I was an accident. They didn't really want me to be here. In some ways, that was my perception. And Gabor said, "It's not amazing that they didn't want you to be here. Maybe, we don't know. But something bigger wants you to be here." And I'm not doing this work by myself. I'm very humble in the sense that I know that when I'm sitting here and talking to my clients, I'm not by myself. I have my ancestors with me. I have their ancestors. My profession is not just me doing this work. I have so many people helping me to do what I do.
This is the Gifts of Trauma podcast. Stories of transformation and healing through compassionate inquiry. Welcome to the Gifts of Trauma podcast by Compassionate Inquiry. Today, I'd like to welcome Soraya Romao-Inglis. Soraya, it's such a pleasure to have you with us. Welcome to the show.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Now, I'll introduce you briefly by sharing that you're a trauma psychotherapist. You're a psychedelics-assisted psychotherapist. You're a grief educator, a somatic experiencing practitioner, and a Kundalini yoga teacher who uses mindfulness practice with your clients. Now, I wonder what you'd like to add to that very professional introduction.
Oh, I'd like to share that I have an incredible partner that supports my journey as a psychotherapist. And I have an incredible dog that supports me in this journey too. He's usually around when I'm seeing my clients. And I'd like to add that I have a wonderful team of people in my life that support me to do this work. They remind me about self-care. Yeah. And I'd like to, as well, to thank a couple people that have been teaching me so many things. People that I respect a lot, Peter Levine, and beautiful women in this field as well. I think this community, this village, helped me to be who I am as a professional and as a psychotherapist. And I'm not doing this work by myself. I'm very humble in the sense that I know that when I'm sitting here and talking to my clients, I'm not by myself. I have my ancestors with me. I have their ancestors in the room. Just to add that my profession is not just me doing this work. I have so many people helping me to do what I do. So
thank you for sharing that, Soraya. Yes, being supported by a community is so important. And I can understand that personally, being part of the compassionate inquiry community. What I can't understand, and I'd love for you to speak about a little bit more, because I was adopted as an infant, I don't have a sense of ancestors. So can you talk a little bit? Of course, I do have them. Everybody has ancestors, but I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that support that you feel coming through your ancestral lineage. How does that show up? How does it affect your work? Maybe just steer us around this ballroom a little bit.
Rosemary, it's a very important question and yet very complex question, because some days I feel their presence and some days I don't feel their presence. And some days what I have been observing, I feel the presence of my ancestors when I'm taking care of my needs as well, when I allowed myself to do little things that are important for me, like when I go for a walk in the forest, when I connect, when I have the silence. My experience with my ancestors and to feel this the presence of something happened when I was 14 and I had a car accident. When I was 14, unfortunately, I had this car accident, and I could say, or I should say, or may say that what you see right now is a miracle. I survived. And it's a kind of a very uncomfortable conversation that in my family, my mom doesn't like to talk about it, my dad doesn't like to talk about it. But I knew when the car accident was happening, I had this sense that someone or something was telling me everything will be fine. So that changed completely my relationship with ancestors, spirituality. So I remember having that experience before the accident. And when the accident happened, I really felt that I wasn't by myself. I cannot explain really, but it's just the sense that something was holding me, was protecting me in some ways. And after that accident, I started having a lot of experiences by myself that I couldn't really understand what was happening. And then after that, I just relaxed because I had a grandmother and my family, and especially my grandmother, were very spiritual. So I started understanding a couple of things that were happening with me. But I was very quiet. After that accident, I became very introspective and reading about spirituality. And so ancestors for me is it's almost like part of my daily life. Is I know that I'm not by myself, and because probably I had that experience and something was telling me you're not by yourself.
That's an amazing story. So I'm suspecting from the way you set that up, it was almost, it could be considered a miracle. The fact that you didn't get hurt in the way that you could have that's how you were protected. So what might have been expected that didn't happen to you?
You was talking about during the accident what didn't happen to me. Yeah. Oh, on my life.
That's definitely. So you survived.
Yeah, and I love this when I say I'm alive because I see Peter Levine sometimes doing this with clients going through like trauma, like complex trauma, veterans. Recently, I saw a video with him doing this demo, and he going, this person could be that, and actually, I'm alive. And how I'm saying when I say I'm alive, my whole body goes, yes, you're alive. What things that could have happened, I could have died, so I'm still alive. I could be, I don't know, something like disabled in some ways. But one thing happened, yeah. It's in some ways reinforced a trauma that I was carrying for a long time. And that is a work that I did through my life. The trauma that I had that I wasn't planned because when my mom and dad got pregnant, they didn't plan their pregnancy. I always had this belief, this trauma, and that I'm not supposed to be here. And that trauma brought as well a lot of shame. I was carrying a lot of shame before the accident, and that shame was reinforced by the accident because I have a big scar in my face when I was 14. I think that is why as well I became very introspective, but it was just reinforcing a trauma that how it was not happened when I was in my mom's womb. The things that I have been working through these years. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And as you reflect back on that, I would think, just from hearing what you've shared so far, that the fact that you did survive, you are alive, would perhaps have offered support that, I am supposed to be here. If I wasn't supposed to be here, I would have been gone. I would not have survived that accident.
For sure. Yeah. And I had a chance to have a session with Gabor once. This was in 2015 or 16. something like that. And I remember sharing with him the fact that my mom and my dad never planned me. I wasn't planned. I was an accident. They didn't really want me to be here. In some ways, that was my perception. Yeah. And Gabor said, "It's not amazing that they didn't want you to be here. Maybe we don't know, but something bigger wants you to be here."
Yeah. And I noticed you used the word accident. You were an accident, then the accident happened. So interesting.
So that when I heard that, something really shifted inside of me. And I had opportunity to many times during my journey as a psychotherapist give this gift that Gabor gave me to someone and see how they feel when they hear that something or someone, something bigger than us wanted you here.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that will be resonating with some of our listeners. I think it's not an unusual belief because a lot of babies come into this world unplanned. So thank you. I'm just going to go back a little bit and reference all the training. I started out this conversation with all of your credentials, all of your skills, psychedelics, trauma, somatic experiencing, grief education. It's a lot of training. And I'm curious as to whether you, like me and many people in the compassionate inquiry community, might consider yourself chronically curious.
Well, that is a good way to say that. Chronic, yeah, chronic curious. I am chronic curious. And then sometimes I sit with myself and I'm inquiring that if I'm chronic curious or if a part of my trauma is still present and I'm still trying to avoid that sense that I'm not good enough, that I'm not supposed to be here, that I'm not important. Because I had training IFS. I trained IFS. I trained in somatic experience, EMDR, every vagus theory, everything that is showing up, a portal. Okay, to have this training here, let's try to do that training. So I wonder sometimes, I find that is a fine line between I'm a curious human being trying to learn because I love learning. That is a fine line between that and my trauma. When I'm supposed to be here, if I'm here, I have to prove why I'm here. So I'm still trying to understand that part that needs to be involved in so many trainings and be involved so deeply with some communities and always thinking that I have something more to learn. So it's just curiosity.
Curiosity comes up a lot in compassionate inquiry. There's a power, a strength in curiosity. I wonder what has curiosity done for you? How has it gifted you in your life? This drive to find out.
That's why I'm here with you, Rosemary, today. Curiosity is like my superpower. I have been curious since I was very young. I have this very curious mind. I think that's why I'm here. I was curious about people's minds. I was curious about the underground world. I was curious about Kundalini. I was curious about Gabor. That's why I'm here. I was curious about Peter Levine. I was curious about Dick Schwartz. And so I think the curiosity is taking me to places. I was curious about how it would be to live abroad. Now, this is not I wasn't born where I am right now. So I was curious how it would be to live in a different place. So I moved to Canada, and it was because of being here that I'm doing what I'm doing. So curiosity opened so many doors for me. Yeah.
Thank you. And speaking of which, I'd like to reference your background by sharing a few words that I found on your website and then ask you to comment. On your website, you say,
I don't remember anymore what I wrote there.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll share it with you. You said that as a BIPOC person who was born in Brazil, who's been a settler in Canada for over 20 years, that you bring to your sessions, as we just discussed, the teachings received from your ancestors and your experience as an immigrant. So I wonder if we could dig into a couple of these points. Was it purely curiosity that brought you from Brazil to Canada? Was there any other motivation?
I think motivation was to find my true self. I think being in Brazil, in some ways, I was looking for myself. And all I have to say, my own experience when you step out of the bubble. I was living that bubble in my country, my language. So when I had opportunity to step out of that bubble, I said, you know what? I would love to understand myself. I wasn't happy in Brazil. I was trying to figure out life in so many ways. Said, okay, I'm going to Europe. And suddenly this opportunity came to come to Canada. And I landed here. Yeah. And being BIPOC, that is very interesting. Being BIPOC in Canada.
Tell us, please. What is it like?
BIPOC, and I'm an immigrant in Canada, is someone who was trying to heal trauma. I don't know if I should be in this planet or not. And then you land in a land that is not really your land in some way. Is pushing, I was really pushing myself. Something was really pushing myself towards my healing.
It takes great courage. It takes a lot of courage to go to a new country with a new language, a different culture. That takes a lot.
Oh, and if you really want to heal a trauma like I'm not good enough, just move to another country and you're BIPOC and move to another country. Then you need to work hard. The part of you that believes that you're not good enough. Yeah. Being a BIPOC person in Canada, and I'm very glad that I'm here in this country. I'm very proud of now carrying a Canadian passport, but it can be quite challenging because the microaggressions, they happen everywhere, and they're very subtle, and there is a subliminal aspect of the microaggressions when you're a BIPOC and an immigrant, and it takes a lot of work to avoid, and the Gabor talks about those beliefs, interpretations, and it takes a lot of work every single day to really see your interpretations as just interpretations. Yeah. So it has been an incredible journey for me, a healing journey to heal so many aspects of myself.
I wonder if part of the challenge is the subtlety. Microaggressions, they're tiny, they're almost covert. If the experience you had was more obvious, more blatant, do you think it would have been perhaps a little easier to process because you can see what other people are thinking and feeling? It's clear as opposed to this sort of pretended acceptance, yet it's not acceptance.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, I think it would be easier because then you start questioning yourself. Is it just me? My belief system? Is what I'm experiencing now is based on my trauma? Because I think that I believe that I'm not good enough, or, I believe that I'm not supposed to be here, that I was an accident. So it can be quite confusing sometimes. So if it was more like clear and it was really on my face, probably will be it'll be very painful, but it will be easier to understand as well.
Something you can recognize. It doesn't cause you to self-doubt, to question yourself. It's, did that really happen? Or is that my perception? Yeah. When you get into that territory, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, and being my husband is a non-BIPOC person. So being with him, how different is when I'm with him and when I'm not with him. The intersectionality that happens here. When I'm with him is a BIPOC person with a white man. When I'm without him, I'm a BIPOC person, an immigrant, and a woman by myself. So that is a lot of things that people cannot see, but my system sees it. And it's not even something rational. When I observe myself sometimes, for example, when I'm crossing the border, when I'm traveling, when I'm going to some places, my whole system gets activated because I know that I need to behave a different way.
Yeah. So it's almost as if you have two personas. One is you, the BIPOC female immigrant, and then there's you when you're with your partner, the BIPOC female immigrant with the white male.
Exactly. Who is not an immigrant, was born in Canada. And yeah, so another day I was thinking about that if I do have different nervous systems, adapting for different situations and different beliefs, different interpretations that I'm having. I'm very glad that you asked this question because
It's totally different. I'm sure it's totally different. And thank you for affirming that. That's just another burden that a BIPOC person gets to deal with when they do fall in love with someone who's not BIPOC. Thank you. Now, on your website, you say you work with a multicultural, compassionate lens with your clients. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about how you understand that multicultural, compassionate lens shows up in your work.
when I put that word there, I remember clearly, I was like, oh, what this word will mean for people when they are reading my website. And I really don't know what they think about it, but they are coming. So I can tell you that it's 70, maybe 75 or 80% of my clients, they are immigrants. They are in Canada or different parts of the world and dealing with all these struggles that come when you're an immigrant. I can say that 60%, 7% of my clientele is BIPOC, dealing with its struggles. And I was actually looking another day because it was like, it was interesting that to see a percentage of my clients and how the demographic of my clients dealing with struggles. And it's incredible to see how, I don't know if people are reading my bio or not, but they are showing up and how comfortable my system is when I have someone who is having some struggles that I had or that in some ways I have those struggles. So I feel like there's a lot of power in balancing this field, but I can feel that I can meet my clients where they're at and and I hope they can feel that too.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure it makes a huge difference. Just we all know, those of us who go through the compassionate inquiry training, what it's like to be truly seen and heard and understood. So that lens may be the first opportunity they've had for quite some time to be truly seen and heard and understood. Thank you. I'm sure there's huge benefits. I'm wanting to connect this to your work. You do a lot of advocating for marginalized communities. You completed an anti-racism Indigenous cultural safety certificate, and you support the crime victim assistance program. So can you tell us how these all weave together with your personal experience as a BIPOC woman in Canada?
That was my ignorance that took me to those programs, knowing that I didn't know anything about really Indigenous peoples in Canada. I remember when I had to study to get my citizenship, nothing was mentioned about by Indigenous people and their history. And I was appalled that when I was talking to this very intelligent, brilliant friend that I have, Canadian, that gave me a book and said, read more about history of Canada. So I was very blessed that I had some people in my life telling me, but because of my ignorance, I was like, I need to read and to be informed if I really want to work in Canada, to understand the consciousness, the collective consciousness that is in this country. about something that happened and still happening. As Gabor likes to say, the government never said, I'm sorry. It's still happening.
I've heard that
Yeah.
too. And I'm wishing, as I listen to you share your motivation, that more Canadian-born Canadians had that curiosity and looked into it, because it's an amazing, fascinating, horrific story, depending on which aspect of that you look at. I had a guest on earlier this year who shared the story of how Canada came to be, an Indigenous elder and wisdom keeper. And there was no war, there was no conquest, there was just a generosity of the Indigenous people that has been so abused by the descendants of the colonists at this point. And it's really a story and an education that I appreciate you pursuing. And hopefully this conversation sets out afire some curiosity in Canadian-born listeners, and they actually do the research as well and find out about it, because it's one of those truth is stranger than fiction stories.
Yes, and I think it is important to know what happened. It is important to be informed, yeah, so we can really understand people. Yeah. I have some clients, the parents are Japanese, and in Japanese they have a very similar story in Canada when their possession was that the government took everything from them. So to understand as well, sometimes some patterns that we see in our clients, if you can understand their ancestors' history, you probably will understand your client better. So when we talk about ancestors, it's not just like having this acknowledgement that ancestors are here in the room, but is acknowledging that the client is present, but behind this client, there is a history that this client in some ways is carrying. So that is important for me, very important. Sometimes the elephant is in the middle of the room and you don't know what kind of elephant is there. Yeah. And perhaps it's the elephant of this history that the client is carrying, and the client is not even aware.
Yeah. And I'm happy you brought that up, because there's so many people doing amazing work in this field. Resma Menakem comes to mind. And Thomas Hubel, like Resma, says that the same skin-colored people need to go back and deal with their collective history before they can deal with how they interconnect with different skin-colored people. And it makes so much sense when you track back through that. And it's really fascinating that has such a pullover. A lot of what Thomas Hubel is doing these days is really helping people expose that ancestral history. And only through healing that can we really fully heal ourselves. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for asking those questions.
I'm interested in speaking a little bit about your work now. You say that your particular interest is working with clients who are experiencing trauma, anxiety, addiction, depression, eating disorders, grief, and those who are seeking support with psychedelic integration. And you also specialize in working with people experiencing codependency. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about any aspect of this work that's really alive for you today, where you're out there supporting clients with these issues. Is there anything that really pops up for you'd like to address?
Yes, Rosemary, thank you again for this question. And all the time that we write our bios, this is what I do, this is work with this. And in some ways, I'm talking about myself. Why I'm so comfortable talking and having clients dealing with eating disorders, for example, especially emotional eating. Yeah. Because I saw this happening in my own family, and no one was talking about that.
Another elephant in the room.
Another elephant. So I'm comfortable with that. And it's fair enough. I have the amount of clients coming to me and talking about their emotional eating and how unhappy they are with the bingy part they have been carrying, that have been dealing for so long. And when I look at my clients and they're a reflection of my family, I was present when this was happening. So in some ways that really caught my attention when I went to university and I said, I want to study a little bit more eating disorders.
I wonder, could you unpack that a little bit for us? With your background, you work with anxiety, you work with trauma, you work with eating disorders. What can come together to result in someone experiencing, like using an eating disorder to support or cope with life in some way?
Yeah. And now, Rosemary, one thing that I have been observing, and many people have been observing, that we have just one word really to, if you could describe everything, is trauma. So my eating habits are based on my trauma. My eating habits, they are supporting me. They are helping me to navigate life. They are helping me to stay away from my emotions, from the reality, what is really happening inside of me. I was even sharing today, I have a circle. I just finished a circle today, CI circle. And our CI circle was a emotional eating circle. Was using the tools of CI tools, but really talking about emotional eating. Yeah. I can tell you that yesterday, and just give an example, someone gave me a certificate, like a facial certificate. So I went to do a facial yesterday as a self-care. And I was happy. And I drove there and I arrived and excited. The spa, the sound, the music, oh, I do my facial. So I'm lying there. And this woman, very skillful woman, and she was doing my facial. And as soon as she touched my scar, something happened in my nervous system. Yeah. So because I have a scar in my face, she was touching my scar, that she was doing a massage and whatever, beautiful hands. And the environment was amazing, but my nervous system said, I'm not safe here. We have to do something. We need to leave. I'm there, lying on this table, beautiful environment, and my nervous system run as fast as you can. But I have been doing the work. I was like, my nervous system is picking up something here. Okay, because she's touching my scar. As soon as I said that, I had memories of my accident, the when the car crashed and everything. So it was becoming like almost overwhelming for me. And I was like, okay, I'm in 2025. Let's breathe here. Suddenly, a part of me, a dynamic or behavior came really quick and said, by the way, when you drive home, you'll be passing by your favorite cake place called Sweet Obsessions. So you can stop there and eat the doce de leche, because it reminds me home. Doce de leche. You can stop there. So just observe this dynamic of my eating, emotional eating. I was experiencing something that was really sad, terrifying, and that memory was coming. My system went and said, I can save you. We don't need to go there. You don't need to feel sadness now because it's not appropriate. This environment, the fear, and you have to be here. So how can we compensate that? After this, we are eating your favorite cake.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was comforting you. It was, in a way, dangling a carrot for you.
Exactly.
If you can get through this, if you can stay here, not run away, that's what's waiting for you on the way home.
Exactly. So you cannot leave this. I could leave, but in part of me was like, no, you cannot leave now. That is not appropriate, whatever my sister was telling me. And this part came and said, oh, well, I know a solution for this. I'll bring some sweetness into your life. And I know how to get that.
And it knew exactly where to go and that it was on your route home. Very clever. Wow.
Yeah, very clever part of me.
So I'm curious, did you stop on the way home?
I did. But then right beside this bakery, has a beautiful supermarket. So I negotiate with my partner and I said, so what about this? I go to the supermarket and I buy something that you like and it's healthy. And I went and I bought something healthier than a cake. But this negotiation, having that pause, that moment to understand, yes, I understand now. When I was in the car and I actually was talking to my husband and I said, oh, this happened to me. And I was emotional with him. And I said, this is incredible. I'm so glad this is happening because now I can take this to my therapist. That is still something that you need to revisit. But look how my part, my eating part, was really ready to go to help me to feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I've wondered for a long time about this. Do you think this obesity epidemic that is taking over so much of the Western world, do you think that is connected to this whole eating for comfort dynamic?
Oh, I think so. I think studies have been showing that people are eating because their nervous system is dysregulated.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we need to find things to regulate ourselves. And some people find that regulation through food. Some people find that regulation from alcohol. Some people find that regulation for different types of things. And for sure, I think we have a very dysregulated society. Just drive your car around and you see that. When I'm driving here in Vancouver, you can see how dysregulated people are. I'm getting really frustrated just because someone turned right instead of left. And you can see the rage. And yeah, definitely. Dysregulation, when our system is dysregulated, we try to find things externally to regulate our system. So for sure, food,
Yeah.
for sure.
So socially acceptable things. And in Canada in particular, the culture is one that doesn't necessarily directly express what it's thinking. So if you can just paper over something with a sweet treat and soothe it, then maybe you don't have to address the core.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Especially in societies where people cannot really express themselves. Or household, kids, they cannot express themselves. Gabor talks about this, and Peter Levine talks about this, and Dick Schwartz, and so many people talk about this. And this dysregulation, one thing that I have been really curious and is this dysregulation, the nervous system being dysregulated, and how can we find ways to regulate our nervous system? Is for me is amazing to see how our nervous system tries to regulate.
Yeah. Thank you for taking us a little bit deeper into that and sharing your story. Are there any other major categories of dysfunction, if I can use that word, that are related to this nervous system dysregulation? Like anxiety would seem to be one, but or are they all related?
Yes, when you, for example, doing an CI session, you can easily see those dysregulations happening when a client said, oh, you have this anxiety, I have this fear, so the system gets dysregulated. They don't have the flexibility. Yeah. When the dorsal, and I'm very depressed, I cannot get out of this. So it is regulation of the system, depression. Yeah. So you see all the mental disorders that the labels that people like to give out there. You can see that they are just telling us that the nervous system is dysregulated. The system, for me, in my view, is dysregulated.
Thank you. Yes, and that brings us beautifully to psychedelics assisted psychotherapy. Because as Gabor has spoken of, psychedelics offer an opportunity to get to the other side of those coping strategies. This gives us a direct access that we can't have when our rational mind is in charge. So I wonder if you can speak a little bit about how psychedelic assisted therapy deals with issues stemming from dysregulation and also about the integration support that is offered to clients afterwards.
I never talk about this, but it's something that I have been noticing as well. I think in this field, you'll notice something and different clients having different reactions, bringing something new and you get curious. But one thing that I have been observing how some psychedelics, especially for me in my experiences, the mushrooms, there is something about being an observer of yourself with mushrooms. Yeah. Even like Caporal, sometimes he gives some examples, and I'm not sure if he's talking about that, but he can observe himself being a baby, and he knew that he was an adult, he wasn't a baby, have an experience. So there is something about becoming an observer, in observing your nervous system. You don't know that you're observing your nervous system, but you're seeing your nervous system, how your nervous system got dysregulated. So that is something fascinating for me. In my own experience with psychedelics, I can see my own nervous system, being dysregulated because I'm observing myself. That the mushroom allows me to do it. Not all the time, but majority of the journeys is, oh, I'm observing this. I'm seeing things, I'm feeling things, but I'm observing. So I remember when a journey that I had an intention. And the intention was, I'd like to know a little bit more why I'm here. I'm not supposed to be here, but I'm here. So what is my purpose here in this life? And when I start my journey, I remember having the sense that my ancestors, they were present in the room. And I was observing that. And I was like, wow, this is a good trip. I'm tripping. This is awesome. So I could feel the presence of women behind me. As an observer, I was like, oh, this is interesting. What they're trying to say. And what is here? And then this message came, just relax and don't try to control anything. Your nervous system is trying to control everything all the time. Not with those words, but the message was like, just relax, don't try to control. So the message that I got, my nervous system has been trying to control everything every time. And so when you have something that wants to control, something has to come to relax that system. So that's why probably compulsive eating is present, the emotional eating is present, because there's nervous system. So it's incredible to see that with the mushrooms, especially the psilocybin, this ability, capacity that we have to observe ourselves. And when I'm doing this work with my clients, I try to, in some ways, to invite them to observe their nervous system. There is a message there about how they have been regulating themselves in this world.
Yeah. And that perspective as an observer can help them connect the dots between the trauma, maybe the belief, like you said, I'm not meant to be here, I'm not supposed to be here, and the coping mechanism, which could be disordered eating when you're not hungry, comforting yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a client, I can give an example that this client was having a journey, and this client came to this conclusion that when mom was nursing, mom was in a rush all the time. I was in a rush. So this baby learned that I need to eat as fast as I can and stuff myself because I'm not sure when that boob will be here again. When my mom will be giving me food again, I don't know when this breast will be available. So let me stuff everything that I can right now because maybe I won't be able to survive.
Yeah, definitely a survival instinct. Wow. That is a beautiful illustration.
So this person, in some ways, has been working out with the integration, and now she can understand a little bit more why she's a compulsive eating, like binging.
Yeah.
Maybe it's there. We don't know, but there is a possibility. There is a possibility that binging, that compulsive eating, started when she was a baby because she didn't know if the breast will be there.
Yeah. It would make sense. It would make so much sense if that's true. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense, Rosemary, but I'm so fascinated by this. I'm like, wow. I don't know if this is happening, but there is a possibility here.
Yeah, I understand your fascination and I share it. So thank you. I'd like to shift a little bit and just ask you your work as a healer, as a therapist. Is this something you always knew you wanted to do? Was it always your goal to become a therapist, work with people this way?
I wanted to be an actor.
Ah,
I was in a theater company for many years when I was a child until I went to university. But then I had a car accident, and my scar was something like a big no-no for me. And in Brazil at that time, I think it was a big no-no for media or any kind of media to have a scar on your face. So it was my big dream to be a theater actor, not a film theater. I have this passion for theater. But then I went to university and I studied communication, propaganda, and marketing. And I was in the theater, but not really on the stage. I was behind. So I was designing campaigns for products and advertising agencies. I was working in advertising agencies. And I got tired of that because I didn't want to do that anymore. But I always had this passion for psychology, and I was reading about psychology. I was very passionate. I've always had a passion for the mind. And I was reading some books of Freud because I could really fascinating how people think and how people behave. And I had some during my university. I had psychology as well in my university, but the psychology was a little bit different. It was how to make people believe that they need the product that you're selling. That was the psychology that I was studying, and I thought that was fascinating. So, anyways, decided to not do that anymore, to take a break, and I came to Canada. And I traveled around, and I said, "Oh, maybe I can live in Canada one day." Went back to Brazil, applied for immigration, got the papers, came to Canada, and I was like, "Oh my God, now I am here." And then I took a yoga class. My best friend told me, Soraya, let's take some yoga class, a training, not yoga class, training. Yes, let's do it. So I did. I love it. And then I started going and taking courses and bringing that curious, the chronic curious that you mentioned. So taking all these courses and end up in Kundalini. And then I was like, I want to do this work. I want to do this work, but I want to use this work helping people dealing with trauma. And I took some courses, a trauma course for using yoga. And then Matt sat that in. And then the rest is history. Yeah. Then I went back to university. Yeah.
and qualified in
Yeah.
your master's. Wow.
Yeah, so we one day, Beyond Addiction, I don't know if you know this program, that it's a beautiful program that Saturn wrote for this program. So I was invited Saturn to teach this program in Vancouver, and the people in Vancouver were here. Saturn said, I'm inviting Gabor Mate to be part of this program as special guest. I was like, sorry? He said, yes, I couldn't believe because I was reading his books, going and seeing him here and there. And then he came. I look and I said, I want to do this. I look at Gabor, I said, wow, not be Gabor, but I'd like to do this type of work. Talked to him and said, Gabor, I want to do this type of work. And then he used a beautiful story about, I don't think he remembers that, about Wizard of Oz. And he said, do you know the scarecrow of Wizard of Oz? And I said, yes, I know. Remember the story? And I said, remember what he wanted? And I said that he wanted a diploma. He said, yes, is what you need. He wanted a brain. He wanted to have a brain, the scarecrow. And then he said, do you remember what the wizard gave him? I said, a diploma. He said, yes, go back to university and get your diploma. This is what you need. I went back and got my diploma, did my master's in psychology, and did my master's in eating disorders and psychedelics. And that's it. The rest is history.
Yeah. And you answered my question without me even asking it of how did you connect with CI? So it was all very organic. You met Sataram through the Kundalini work, and then you were introduced to Gabor through Beyond Addiction. And What a journey. So when did all that happen? Can you remember? It must have been quite a few years ago.
Well, 2018 was when Sadaran invited us to be part of two groups of people to be part of the pilot, the Compassion Inquiry pilot. But before that, we had in 2016, I believe, was in 2016 that we had a kind of conference workshop. The videos that we see from 2016 was when Gabor did Compassionate Inquiry in Vancouver. Yeah. So the first time that he was actually talking about compassionate inquiry, really. And then Sadaran, brilliant Sadaran, put everything together and wrote what we have now, this jewel that we have now. And she invited two groups, and I was in one group in 2018. So we were studying compassionate inquiry and just having meetings, dyads, triads, trying and seeing and giving her feedback. And so she was collecting data and understanding what will be working, what will be working. So I was part of the team, and I never left.
So you were part of the development of the current compassionate inquiry training process. How exciting.
I was there when Gabor was watching us doing sessions. I was there.
You were one of the test drivers, if I can use that expression.
Yes, yeah, and I never left. I loved this work so much that I stayed. And
yeah, yes, you're a certified practitioner, you're a facilitator, which means that you train people in this compassionate inquiry approach. You're a mentor, which means that you work with the more senior people, and you're a CI Circles leader. And that's the program for people who don't have the diploma in their background, who are just curious about Gabor's approach. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit, because most recently you've become the Compassionate Inquiry Portuguese program director. So you get to take the message of compassionate inquiry out into the world, and particularly back to the country where you were born, Brazil, speaking Portuguese. Tell us a little bit. How does that feel?
feels fabulous. Feels really good. Okay, I don't know how to thank Gabor and Sadaran for this opportunity. I have been talking about this since 2018, that we needed to translate this program into Portuguese. We have 250 million people in Brazil, 500,000 psychologists, registered psychologists in Brazil.
That's amazing. I had no idea. Congratulations. And I'm sure it was a lot of hard work. It probably still is a lot of hard work.
The program is quite small now, but the potential, like 250 million people in Brazil, you can imagine how many clients I can have in that country. So many people there. And besides that, the psychologists, certified psychologists in Brazil, 500,000. So the possibility here is incredible. And it's so nice to teach, because now we have circles in Portuguese. We have the facilitator short course in Portuguese that is a very short version of the professional. We translating the professional now takes time to translate the professional. But it's so amazing to see the community when you're teaching a facilitator short course, for example. I just finishing a group and starting another one, to see how people are thirsty for those teachings. So incredible to see. And this inclusion, including people that wouldn't be able to study Gabor if we didn't have this program translated. It's just amazing to give this gift to people there.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I wonder if you could share for our listeners, like obviously Portuguese is spoken in Brazil and Portugal. What other countries in the world could take advantage of this?
We have Portugal, Brazil, we have East Timor, Indonesia. So we have a couple of places. You have Africa, places in Africa. So it's just like the community is not a big community, yeah? But it's so important to, in some ways, invite those communities to learn what we're learning. This is one thing that compassionate inquiry is so in my practice. I cannot really do my practice today without compassionate inquiries. It's always compassionate inquiry in my practice. And I can see the shift. The shift is really quick, and people can see themselves so quick. They can understand themselves, they can connect the dots, they can feel, they can release things that were there for so long. So when you see that happening and giving those communities opportunity, and especially colonized communities like Brazil, the trauma is there. It's so vivid. I went to Brazil in March, and you can see that the trauma is there. And give that population opportunity to really understand themselves. It's pretty amazing.
An amazing vision. And what an opportunity for Portuguese-speaking therapists to really get in on the ground floor of this brand new program. I will be including a link in the show notes for anyone who's Portuguese-speaking to learn more about how they can jump into this opportunity. Soraya, it's been wonderful. We're coming to the end of our time together. I'd love to invite you to share some final words. I know we've explored a lot in this journey, and you've shared very generously your own experiences, but this is an opportunity to end this conversation with a few words that you think the world is really ready to hear right now. What would you like to say?
I'd like to say that there is more beautiful things in this life than we can imagine. I think we are living this, in some ways, in this era that people are not believing in, that without hope. But I just want to share that the work that we do, the work that I do, the work that I see the community, compassionate inquiring community doing, gives me a lot of hope. There are more good people out there than people that don't want us happy. There are more people out there wanting us to be happy. I don't like people to believe that in some ways. When I'm in this community, I have a lot of hope that we are doing something that will be helping people to see that too. Yeah.
Beautiful words, because if there's something that the world could use more of right now, given all of this chaos, it's hope. Hope that there is something better. Thank you, Soraya. Thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you. I'm very grateful, and I would like to congratulate you on this journey podcast and inviting incredible people, joining the people that are doing incredible work. And I'm very humbled that actually I got invited to be here. Thanks so much.
You are one of those people, Soraya, doing incredible work. It's interesting that whatever we do never looks as incredible to us as what someone else does, perhaps. You are definitely very welcome here. You are doing incredible work. So thank you for joining us today and sharing that.
Thank you for your kindness. Thank you.
Hey friends, if you are or have participated in the Compassionate Inquiry Professional Training Programme, please join us from June 17th to June 19th at Renewal, a CI Summer Solstice Retreat hosted by Sataram Kaur and 18 CI facilitators from around the globe. In this immersive journey into renewal and transformation, you'll experience guided practices, nature immersions, creative activities, small group workshops, connection circles, meaningful conversations, and much more, all designed to support your journey inward as we celebrate the solstice in community. Tap the link below in the show notes to learn more and secure your place.
The Gifts of Trauma is a weekly podcast that features personal stories of trauma healing, transformation, and the gifts revealed on the path to authenticity. Listen on Apple, Spotify, all podcast platforms. Rate, review, and share it with your clients, colleagues, and family. Subscribe and you won't miss an episode. Please note, this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for personal therapy or a DIY formula for self-therapy.